Okay, welcome back to Composition with Professor Kent Lee. Last time we engaged in sort of a theoretical discussion. We were talking kind of theoretically about theories and what theories are. Now let's start to kind of bring it more to your particular field of study. We're going to talk today about paradigms, and this is important for understanding the writing of your field. After the last lecture going, what? This is composition. Why are we talking about the theories and stuff? Okay, we're getting a little philosophical here. We're talking about the philosophical foundations of science or humanities in your field of study. So it's sort of philosophical science. It's the philosophy of science. And this is important because this stuff affects how people write in the field. It affects the kind of research that they do, why they do that kind of research, and that affects how people write in the field. So it's important for understanding the writing of your field and other fields. So let's talk about paradigms. There was a famous philosopher in the 20th century named Thomas Kuhn. He was trained as a scientist, and he shifted his focus to kind of philosophizing about science, the philosophy of science. And I find this useful because this describes not only science, but any academic field, I think. So we're talking about paradigms. If you hear the word paradigm, it's used a lot in business, a business model, business paradigm. The use of this word paradigm is influenced by Thomas Kuhn, who started to use the paradigm in this particular way. So looking at science, different fields of science, he described what's called a paradigm, which is really kind of an academic worldview, how scholars or scientists in a particular field view their work in themselves and their community and what they do. It's a paradigm. So, a paradigm, first of all, let's say if you're a linguist or a literature person, you work within a particular theoretical framework. Maybe in some humanities and social science fields, you might work within more than one. I do. I work within several theories in cognitive psychology and in linguistics. I work within several different theories. I kind of go back and forth. I think to be a good linguist, you need to know different theories in linguistics and psychology. And problems come when people don't understand the other theories and other views. And sometimes I've dealt with a few linguists who are not very good linguists, and they only knew their own particular theory. They didn't know others. And they tend not to understand people like me who work in different theories at the same time. But we work within a particular theoretical framework. If you're a biologist, you work within the theory of evolution. That's a framework for you. And maybe another theory like genetics, theory of genetics, or theory of ecology or something like that. Along with that goes the research framework. If you're a physicist, your theory is about understanding the universe. And so you have certain assumptions that go along with this. You assume that we can do experiments and we can find out more, and that there is objective truth that we can know and we can discover, and we can discover more and more as we refine our theories and develop new theories and do better research. We can get to a better understanding of reality and the world through research, through certain kinds of research. If you're a psychologist, you have certain assumptions that the human mind can be known, that you can learn about the human mind through different kinds of psychological research. And so there are certain research methods, and you may not view it as a sort of hard objective reality like the physicist or the biologist, but it's nonetheless something that can be known. It's a little more abstract because you're talking about the mind, but it's something that we can know through a different sort of scientific approach, a scientific method. And that's what most psychologists do. They use scientific methods to study the mind. If you're a literature person, you're not concerned with, are you concerned with objective truth and proving things scientifically? No. You're concerned with the human condition and literature and how people interact with the literature, how the literature affects the reader. That's part of what literary theory is about. So you have a research framework. So if you're a literature person, you do research in a particular way. And it's very different from the kind of work that a theoretical linguist or a sociolinguist would do, or a syntax person. And that's different from the work that a biologist would do, and that's different from the work that an engineer would do, and that's different from the work that a physicist would do. The kind of research work, the kind of work that your professors do. Because of how you see your world. So there's certain values and goals that go along with that. If you're a linguist, you have certain assumptions about language and how important it is. Yeah, it's important. It's about communication. So what language is and what kind of values go along with that. Well, the languages are important. They're valuable. We need to preserve them. We need to understand them. We also want to be able to teach them, so we can want to analyze them so we can better teach them to people who are learning the languages. So different values and goals that go along with that. All of these make up sort of your academic worldview. And it's not just you, but maybe a whole community of people who think like you, and you share your ideas. If you're a professor, you share your research with others, and you communicate and you talk to each other about it. That's a community of scholars. And so all of this is what makes up a paradigm, your academic worldview, and maybe the community that you're part of too, your academic community. That's a paradigm. It's a way of thinking about what you do and what you study. And it's important to understand because that's going to affect the way that you write. The way you write a paper in a literature class is going to be very different from the way you write a paper in a sociolinguistics class or a business course or a theoretical linguistics course, because the different assumptions and goals and kind of research that you do, the writing is very different. So it's important to understand this. So how would you explain the paradigm of your field to someone else? And you can think more generally like linguistics or literature, or you can be more specific like syntax or phonology or modern literature or something like that. Now understand, this question I'm posing you is a hard one. Even if you're a senior, it might be a little hard for you to explain. And you might want to ask an older, more senior student in your department for maybe their thoughts on this question. I would highly recommend that you talk to some older students in your department for insights into this question. What is the field about? Why do we do it? What kind of research do you do? Why do you do that kind of research? Why do you do this kind of research? What are your goals? What's the value of this field? Why is it valuable to society? What's its social value, its practical value? Important questions. When I was a first-year graduate student in linguistics at Illinois, I remember one time I was at a bus station or bus stop. Of course, in America, some people are really friendly. They try to start a conversation with strangers. So this nice gentleman sitting near me started talking to me. He says, "What do you do?" "Oh, I'm a graduate student in linguistics." So, "Oh, linguistics, like French and stuff?" I'm like, "No, not French. I mean, French is cool, but that's not what I do." "So, what do you do?" "Well, I try to study language." "Oh, like French and stuff?" No. Now, as a first-year graduate student, I didn't know how to explain to this guy what linguistics is. It's kind of abstract. It's to study human language. Actually, different linguists will kind of conceptualize language differently. So language is like a human ability up here in the mind. It's a cognitive ability that we want to understand by analyzing languages, the abstract structure of different languages. but I couldn't really know enough to explain that to a guy, like an uneducated but nice guy, a very nice guy, but he probably hadn't gone to college, I guess. How could I explain to him? So obviously I didn't understand it well enough to explain it to like an average guy on the street. So I don't expect you to have any profound insights, but just how would you explain to someone, what is the study of contemporary literature, or what is syntax, what is phonology, why do you do it, why do you study it, how do you study it? Okay, what can you tell somebody about the paradigm of a particular field or subfield? Maybe you're taking classes in several different things. Okay, pick one, pick your favorite, pick the one you know best. How would you explain to someone else, what is this field about? What's your paradigm? Pause the video and discuss this for a while. And we're back. I'll walk you through some examples later, maybe in the next video segment, but I want to start looking at some more particular questions related to the writing in the field. For this question, I would strongly suggest you get one or two academic papers, maybe papers you're reading in a class by scholars or researchers in the field, a published research paper by a scholar in your field in a course. Try to find something that you can understand and read. Look at the paper. What kind of claims or arguments does the writer present? And then how does the writer try to explain or justify their claims or their arguments? So look at an academic paper in your field or subfield. What's the thesis? What's the main idea? How does the writer support it? What kind of evidence do the writers give? Of course, their analysis is probably objective. What makes it objective in this paper? What kind of argumentation do they use? What are their arguments? How do they develop their arguments? But especially, what kind of evidence or support do they provide in the paper, in the body paragraphs of the paper? What kind of evidence or support do they provide for their ideas? Take an actual paper. It could be a paper from any academic journal, from a class that you're taking. What kind of evidence do they provide? Okay. What kind of analysis and argumentation do they do? What kind of evidence do they provide? Pause the video and discuss this for a while. And now I want to go further. Look at the evidence or support they provide in the body of the paper. Does it fall into one of these categories? Does it consist of empirical data, empirical evidence? So empirical means like data. They got some data. Now it could be observational data. They did careful observation, note-taking and analysis of something. So think of an anthropologist observing a new people group and taking careful notes and doing interviews and observations and stuff. Similar techniques could be applied to classroom research, education research. Somebody observes a classroom and takes detailed notes and tries to analyze what happens, the social interaction or the kind of language interaction, the kind of language learning that happens here. It could be case study, like a case study of a business, a description of a business and how it succeeded or how it failed and why. A case study. It could be a case study of a person. Here's a case study of a person, an immigrant from maybe South America who suddenly was moved to Los Angeles, and how they learned English and their English learning processes and mistakes and difficulties, and maybe in a writing class, for example, or in a speaking class, or just in general by immersing herself in the language. A case study of a person, a case study of a learner, a case study of a business, a case study of a patient, okay, a case study. Could be descriptive statistics, percentages, averages, counts. Could be quantitative data and inferential statistics. So they do a sophisticated data analysis, a lot of numerical data, and they use statistics to show that one group is different from the other, that a particular treatment worked or didn't work, or that a particular hypothesis was true or not, using more serious statistics. Or maybe it's just purely theoretical argumentation. A person starts with a proposition or a thesis and develops theoretical arguments and presents pretty much mostly theoretical arguments and explanations for why they think they're right. So pause the video and discuss this. Look at least one real paper and what kind of evidence do you see here? So based on this discussion, look at more papers in a particular field or in a particular research area. Are they similar? Is there a similar research approach being used? If so, maybe you can say that there's a particular general research approach being used here. Is the work in this field mainly theoretical, like in theoretical linguistics? Or maybe there's a little bit of empirical data being used also, but it's mainly theoretical argumentation and discussion. Is it qualitative, like observational data or case studies, ethnographic research? So again, the example of an anthropologist. Ethnographic refers to people, like a people group. So an anthropologist observes a people group and does interviews and surveys and stuff. Somebody doing educational research might adapt similar methods, and it can be still called ethnographic research, but it's done in the classroom. It's sort of like an anthropologist observing the classroom. They're observing social interactions, cultural phenomena, maybe also doing some follow-up interviews or some kind of open-ended surveys or something like that. Case studies, that's qualitative. Quantitative is where you collect a lot of numerical data and you use statistical analysis to compare two groups or to examine a hypothesis. It could be mixed methods where there's a mixture of qualitative and quantitative in one paper. And finally, in certain areas of sociolinguistics or sociology, there are these sort of mixed or hybrid approaches that are kind of a mixture of theoretical and qualitative, maybe a little quantitative too sometimes. Critical refers to maybe using a particular theory to critique, for example, to critique the way people are using language, to maybe critique or criticize sexist language using certain linguistic tools, sort of a theoretical and maybe qualitative analysis, maybe some qualitative data, but it's very theoretical. You're critiquing something according to certain criteria, or evaluating how, for example, how effective is the school program, how effective is this company's business model. You're using certain criteria, theoretical criteria, to critique, to evaluate, or to interpret what's going on. Using a theory in sociology to interpret what's happening in a particular country. So using a theory to interpret your data, to interpret ethnographic data, to interpret, case studies and such. So again, pause the video and think about the work in the particular field or subfield or class that you're taking. Is it one of these? Can you classify it into one of these? And what might actually happen in some fields, like in linguistics, is there might be, let's take research in language teaching, applied linguistics and pedagogy. There might be one group of people who follow qualitative theories and they may do qualitative research. There might be another group of people who are more into more scientific theories and then they do more quantitative research on language learning or language teaching. And you might have a little group over here that is really theoretical stuff like Chomsky and linguistics and stuff and language learning. So it can be complicated, but what would be different approaches and why? Now I'm going to give you another question. Which of these approaches appeals to you? When it comes to either reading some scholars' papers in a class, or if you were to go on to graduate school someday and actually do research yourself, which would you like to do? Would you like to do theoretical research? Sitting in a chair and doing theoretical analysis most of the time? Maybe sometimes using real language examples, but mostly doing theoretical analysis. Would you like to do qualitative research, quantitative? What kind appeals to you, and why? Why does it appeal to you?